Hey everyone, I'm Ben Holmes, Developer Relations Lead and former product engineer here at Warp, and I'm joined by the Oz platform team. So let's just do a little round of intros.
Sure. Hey, Ben. My name's Aloke. I am the founding engineer at Warp.
And my name's Ian, and I led the team that built the Oz platform.
And I'm Lili. I'm an engineer that worked with Ian to build Oz.
Nice. So to do a bit of ground setting, I guess we should just start with, what is Oz?
Yeah. So at its simplest level, Oz is an agent that runs in the cloud.
Okay.
And beyond that, it is highly auditable. It's programmable. It's built with developers in mind, with how much you can configure it. You can power it with skills. You can choose any model you want. And it's meant to give a very flexible platform and interface for teams, individuals to deploy agents to the cloud, monitor them, steer them, audit them, in pretty much any point in the developer stack that they want. Like everything from a GitHub action. We have an SDK where you can build a custom integration. You can fire them via the CLI directly in the Warp app. And no matter what way you interact with the Oz platform, all of the runs are viewable at oz.warp.dev in our web app or in the Warp app itself in our management pane, and also available via the public API that we've built.
Okay. So it's an agent that runs in the cloud briefly.
Yes,
but
briefly.
It's also a way to trigger agents literally from anything. So CLI, SDK, cron schedules, anywhere that you would want to do it.
Yeah, anywhere you'd want to do it. It's highly flexible and built, with trying to support the variety of use cases that developers might want to be triggering and interacting with cloud agents.
So it sounds like it's just this whole platform that kind of is what you make of it. And we've been finding ways to deploy it internally to make that happen. And Alok, I feel like you were mentioning earlier something about agents as infrastructure or Oz as infrastructure. It's kind of defined how we've been trying to use this internally to figure out how everyone else might want to use it. So can you give an overview of what that even means? Agents as infrastructure?
Yeah, totally. So one thing as part of building Oz that we've realized is that we kind of need a culture internally of leveraging Oz to up-level ourselves across the entire company. And what's really powerful about Oz is that we can start building on top of it to make a ton of different kind of functions of the company more productive, especially on the engineering team. So we've started building things to make our release workflows more productive, our issue triage kind of faster. So Zach, our CEO, built an agent that goes through all new GitHub issues and dedupes them against other issues, or lets us kind of automate a fix. And what we're realizing, there's a lot of these kind of small pain points internally, whether that's in our engineering org or not, that we can actually make way faster and better by building on top of Oz for these kind of internal dev tools, or just internal tooling kind of more broadly. And so it's been really powerful for us. We're doing things on the engineering team. We're doing things on the growth side, of the growth, the experimentation side.
Our recruiting team is even trying to leverage it.
Yeah. So it's being used across the company to great success.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things popping up. What you were mentioning, I think it was called Power Fixer, where just over a holiday break, I think it was, Zach literally just said, I'm going to build an entire TUI that's just going to use Oz, which is a REST API. It's among many things. You can talk to it over REST API and just ask it to spin off agents to fix GitHub issues and stuff like that. I've also heard it used for fraud detection, feature flags, number of other things. But the first time I saw it and interacted with it was this thing called Warpy. It was just this little guy people were tagging in Slack. What was that?
Yeah, so when we started this project about 4 or 5 months ago, and we were okay, what is going to be the hello world here? What is the first end to end? We have cloud agents deployed in a way that is useful, and we were all right, we want to be able to either tag an issue on Linear or at a Warp bot of some sort on Slack and have it kick off an agent in the cloud and start working on a task and come back with a solution. And as we were really sprinting to this MVP, we were trying to think too, how can we get people to dog food this? This is really a different way of working than engineers are used to, even beyond just working agentically in your IDE or your terminal.
Right.
This is an entirely new way of thinking about how can I get work done. And so we were like, all right, let's put it in Slack. Let's call it Warpy. It's a cute little bot that does, your work for you. And then we had a day where we were like, okay, this is ready, where we told everyone, it's like, you have to start your tasks in Slack. And so it became this like kind of like fun bashing on the infrastructure of like all the engineers like in one Slack channel being like, at Warpy, like, I got this piece of feedback, can you fix it? And then it was kind of this fun way of working in public where everyone was seeing all the work that was getting done, not just by other engineers at the company, but by this like piece of the Oz platform or application of the Oz platform.
Yeah, I think the thing that I really liked about this Warpy Slack channel was, first of all, it felt like this big collective moment. And when you're working at a hybrid company, to have moments where we all come together to do a thing is just exciting in general. But I think especially with this ambient agent, being able to see the ways in which other people interacted with it was very fascinating. We're all trying to figure out how to use the bot, how to prompt agents generally, and to go in the channel and say like, oh, this is how Ian speaks to Warpy. This is what he includes when he's trying to fix this issue. Oh, this is what Aloke thinks is important. Was fascinating. It's also really entertaining to see how different people speak to Warpy. So I think there are multiple instances, especially of Ian, where like, I don't know, you'll go in the thread and it'll say, oh, Warpy, you're a silly agent.
You gotta have fun with it.
No, I know, it's great though. Especially if Warpy ever turns on us in the future, you're probably safe. But I think that having that like public auditable log of this is how people are interacting with our Slack bot, this is what it's being used for. And then one really cool thing about Oz is you can click into the agent sessions and see what's happening. So we can all sort of monitor what's going on with Warpy at once. I think after we had this big bashing on Warpy phase, we also started using Warpy really extensively in our feedback channels. So when people would find an issue with something, they'd post about it in a relevant feedback channel. And then you can kind of see immediately whether we try and get Warpy to start working on it. And then everyone who's reported the issue can look in and see like a fix is actually in progress. An engineer did not have to clone the branch or step out of their own context window to do it. And then the PR gets posted back to Slack and people can just look at it, which is really neat.
Yeah, it's really like shifted, I think, how we've tried to think about like what is an issue you can tackle right now versus put on the backlog. Like it takes 30 seconds of like if there is a feedback thread that comes up in Slack, like it used to be like, okay, let's file an issue. And then maybe there's like a triage meeting where we find an owner. But now it's like just fire off an agent, see how far the agent can get. And like even if it only does like investigation or the PR is like 90% correct, like the engineer having a PR in their inbox that they can iterate on is so much more valuable than having to go through this whole process of like finding an owner for the bug, triaging, et cetera. And that's also why in the platform, we're really thinking about this use case of like the handoff from a cloud agent to, working locally within Warp. Because like, these models are still getting better. They're not perfect. And right now, like we found like it's really, really good. Like it can one shot a lot of issues, but a lot, like it's not quite getting there. But the seamless ability to be like, okay, I have most of this problem figured out, or the agent figured out most of this problem. How can I quickly get this onto my local machine so I can get it across the finish line in like one click? That's something we really wanted to build into the product so that, again, like faster, feedback loop, making sure these PRs get across the line, et cetera.
And to Ian's point, I think it really was the hello world. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the first order of...
And yet it was so useful.
Yeah, really useful. I think it helped build kind of momentum in the engineering team of like, here's all the things we could build on top of Oz. And so Warpy is by no means our only interface to using Oz at the company, but I think it really helped in kind of like driving excitement and getting people to see the aha moment of, oh, I don't need to be doing all this in Warp kind of interactively. There's a lot kind of like features I can build that can start in Slack or other entry points that aren't just kind of like directly typing a prompt into a terminal.
Totally. Yeah. And I also do want to like talk about the feedback channels that we use a little bit, because I haven't worked at a company that does it this way, but Warp is in a unique position of like, we use Warp to build Warp. We're building a developer tool, and so we can do this. Something interesting that I don't think a lot of companies do is actually track all the user feedback and such inside of a Slack channel. And at least when I was doing product engineering, so I guess that's pre-Warpy a little bit, whenever we track things inside of feedback, the best we could do is say, all right, let's convert this feedback to a linear issue. Then let's have a big linear board that's assigned to all of our focus areas and have them run through it and then kick off jobs from there. But now it feels like we've kind of closed that down to just ask the agent right away and just see what happens. Like, I guess at a high level, and it sounds like Ian, you want to jump in, but there's some people have been wondering with agents, like, do you even need a backlog anymore? Do you need to track these things in like a separate space, or can you just like get 0 to 100 just in the conversations that you're having?
I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, go for it.
I think for a lot of issues, you can immediately just fix it.
Yeah.
And the way we think about it is we can have like multiple like levels of an agent analyzing issue and determining what to do, right? So first level is, all right, let's look at the issue. Can we just fix it ourselves? And by we, it really mean Oz. And Oz can fix it. Oz should just fix it and send a PR. Great. If the confidence isn't really there, like, it's maybe 50-50, based on its investigation of the issue, it can at least do some amount of investigation, give a few theories about what the issue is, how we could fix it, and post that in a linear issue. So that's like, if you think about it from 0 to 100, at least it's getting you like 70% or 80% of the way there. And we have that set up for a lot of our issues right now, where we'll get something posted in Slack and Oz will go and do some research and post a summary of like, here I think of some of the causes, here are some of the fixes. And that's really valuable when an engineer has to go like get it past the finish line to have that research done.
Yeah, because then it's like, is this a hour-long task? Is this a 2-day task?
Yeah.
Like, et cetera. Like that investigative step is work in and of itself that is very automatable right now, I feel like. Or even just like feedback will come in and you're like, I didn't even know this was the case. Like, how does this work? Like, at Oz, at Warp, like, what is going on here? Like, can you do some investigation? And then it's posted in the Slack thread. It's all public, or on the linear issue if you tag it there. And so whatever engineer ends up addressing it already has this plan in front of them to, kick off whatever work they need to do to get across the finish line.
Yeah, and there's some set of issues that are large enough that Oz is not going to be able to fix, and the plan may not be perfect. That's going to get better over time with kind of like model improvement. But even having something that's like first order that can even just triage against other issues. So we get a bunch of feedback about X issue. It's deduping, so we have better signal on like actually how pervasive the issue is, even if Oz isn't able to fix it, is already like very, very powerful for us.
Yeah, that's a lot of things. So like deduping issues, doing early research. I know planning mode is something I think it clicked for everyone. Like
it's so
even
good.
a few months
It's
ago.
really good.
Yeah, just like if it can go out and write the plan for you, so you don't even have to prompt it to do the investigation, that's already super valuable. And then if it comes in with a plan, it immediately leads to higher quality output.
100%.
Yeah, and I think connecting this to another way the Oz platform can be used, I think we've all found, at least I've found, that majority of my time working with the agent is trying to construct a really good plan and trying to make it so that with this plan, it knows how to verify the change and validate itself. And then once you do all the work of building this beautiful plan, I don't really need to be around when the agent is executing it. And I think that's one really powerful use case of the Oz platform, is being able to construct a plan, do that interactive thinking work, and then say, I don't need this to run on my computer. This can run somewhere else because it has all the tools it needs. And when we were building this platform, we wanted to make sure that when we run an agent in the cloud, it can run with all the tools it needs. So we put a lot of thought into how we set up the environment and how we bring in the code bases. But I think with this shift where the emphasis is on this planning step, it becomes even more valuable to be able to just autonomously kick off an agent somewhere far away on a remote machine that just does it for you and can check itself and then come back to you with a PR artifact or something like that when it's done.
Yeah, so you were hinting at a few of the aspects of the stack, and we can go a little bit deeper. Like we saw that there was Warpy, which is like a Slack integration that we actually made pretty turnkey. Like you can just set up an account and then you can add it to a Slack group, which is cool. But then we went deeper and said, all right, let's do primitives, because if we want agents to be able to control these things autonomously, that should be part of it. And also, if we want people to build crazy workflows, we need to make it a little bit less batteries included than like a Slack integration, and a lot deeper into, let's just give you all of the nuts and bolts. So I know that there's REST API, so you could build an application that just calls and spins up a cloud agent over HTTP. It's how we built Power Fixer, which is just like a Rust terminal app. But there's also like an SDK where you can program TypeScript and Python code to call into this with a slightly nicer like API surface. And there's also a CLI, there's a web UI, there's all sorts of things. So I guess to at least start painting the picture, like I guess we can talk about some of the things that we built and then go into like the sort of design of how we ended up designing this platform. So beyond Warpy, there was also GitHub review bot that I saw popping up in my PRs a lot more. And it started with, I don't really want to listen to these reviews. And then it turned into, how did you read my mind? This is insane. So I guess just to start with, like, where did that come from? How did we build it? And how did it get so good?
Well, Lili built it, so.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about that. So I think just going back to the idea of all the places you can trigger Oz agents from, the REST API is very much this like narrow waist of all the different ways that we trigger it. Yeah. And then our CLI, just posting to the public post endpoint under the hood. Same with like our GitHub action is we're actually just also using the API under the hood as well. For the GitHub action, we wanted to build it in a way where you could easily insert an Oz agent at any point in autonomous CI workflows.
Yeah, sure.
So we have a public repository actually that makes it really easy to add dispatching or an Oz agent with a prompt as a step in a GitHub workflow. And then alongside that step, which is very simple, you just define these are the input things I want to input to my Oz agent run. This is the source of output I want to get. So for PR review, we'd say like we want to attach this information about the PR. We want to get out comments or review suggestions in this format, and the agent can handle that very well. So that sort of generic framework is available for whatever you want to use it for in GitHub workflows. For PR review specifically, though, and a few other very common workflows, we had to do a lot of prompt iteration. And we've published these prompts in the same public repository as well so that other people can use them. But like you mentioned, when we first started getting GitHub reviews, I think a big thing we saw in the feedback channel was, can you guys turn this off? It's really annoying. Because it would respond with long blocks of text that were often incorrectly formatted. They would give suggestions that weren't very helpful, sometimes wrong. This was maybe back in late November, early December. I think there were two big things that changed that helped us improve the GitHub Actions workflow. The first was the models got better. Opus 4.5, I think we saw a significant improvement in things. And that's a cool thing is just that as a company that's not developing models right now, when other people's models improve, this world that we plug them into improves sort of as a side effect, which is cool.
Yeah.
The other thing was we had to do a lot of iteration on how do we explain to the agent what the structure of the PR is and what output we want comments in, and give it like a format that it can plug into. So another one of the Bengineers is what I was going to say. It's actually true.
We got 3 Bens at the company.
His name is Ben.
And 4 Ians.
So one of the Bengineers, he did a rev on the agent prompt. He actually did this in a very cool way. He had the agent look at all of the recent runs of the PR bot by just saying like, can you scrape using the GitHub CLI? Can you figure out what's going wrong with these PR reviews? So he got like a transcript, a log of all of these things. He asked the agent to then iterate on the prompt based on these common failure modes it was seeing. Like, I commonly misformat my JSON in this way, or I commonly suggest this fix that people don't like. And using the agent suggestions to fix the prompt, we then made a lot of improvements to the prompt and formatting. And I think as a result, that has resulted in what I think of as incredibly helpful PR review comments.
It catches some crazy stuff on PRs now. I also didn't know that's how he iterated on it. That's
Isn't that really cool?
That's really a smart way of like, kind of going back to, I feel like agentic development is like a different way you have to think about how to approach problems. Like that is such a novel way of thinking about even prompt engineering. I feel like that's super cool.
Yeah, well, I think people talk a lot about feeling like some of the engineering is being taken away from their job by delegating things to agents. And I think I very much understood that feeling and still feel it. Like, I liked the feeling of, I've come up with this nifty thing in my code and I get to use it. I think there are new opportunities for creativity, though, in prompt engineering. I think recently we've been talking a lot on the team about how to use agents more effectively and seeing the way other people... We had another engineer who taught our Warp agent how to use the Warp CLI with some custom rules. And that was an early form of orchestration before the Oz platform could really support it. So I think you can be creative with the way that you prompt engineer and like reclaim some of that feeling of I'm being smart. I'm doing something more than what the agent would do on its own.
And I think that's so important for getting these agents to go from like, oh, this is like cool and nifty and novel to this is genuinely useful in my development cycle. We've seen this a lot with design partners we've been working with as we've been building out the Oz platform is like, we had this one design partner that was building out a bot that would basically write unit tests on PRs automatically. And the first iteration where we'd given them this like somewhat generic prompt that we had come up with, and they put in a GitHub action. They were like, it's okay. Like it works sometimes, like it's cool, but it's not really providing much value yet. And we did a rev with them where what ended up clicking is like we just added as basically like context to this agent, like the company's style guides on like what specifically constitutes something that is unit testable, how are these supposed to be written, etc. And like overnight it like clicked for this company. Like they went from like, okay, this is like maybe cool, like I'm interested, but it's not there yet, to we need these agents everywhere. I totally see the value in this. But I think like a lot of companies don't quite have the muscles yet of like really like it's work to invest in these like, again, like agents as infrastructure to get them performing where it's actually really, really beneficial and not just like noise in the workflows, like in different developer workflows.
Yeah. I mean, a really important piece I would pull out of both of y'all's is like, it's only going to be as good as the context that you throw in it. Like you could have asked it, make this GitHub action prompt better. And here's a few notes that I have. Or you could tell it, here's an example of all the PRs and the feedback that people gave, and I'm just going to copy all the transcripts, put them in here. You evaluate it and improve yourself.
I mean, even a step before that, you can say, here's how you find the GitHub PR
transcripts.
You did that I don't have them.
You didn't even copy them.
No. There was no copy pasting. There was, here's the GitHub CLI. Yeah. Look at the workflow runs and figure out what you did wrong.
I think to your point about kind of creativity in the engineering process, to me, it's creativity in the context gathering and verification process. Like those are two things where I think it's not always straightforward of how do I build this and how do I make sure it's correct? That requires a lot of very clever thinking that I think is like really fun. I felt this yesterday. I was building support for something called the Keyboard Kitty protocol, which is actually giving apps that run in the terminal the ability to like have fine-grained understanding of what key presses are occurring in the terminal. And I found some script that someone had created to like run by a human where you could like type in keys and ensure that whatever CLI program was actually getting the right escape sequences. And so I built some like automated agent-backed way using Oz to simulate those key presses and verify the output of that script so then I could actually do this fully automated and make sure it works. But again, it requires like a lot of thought of like, what's the right way to verify, what's the right way to get context. But I think that's actually the thing that's like most fun and most empowering of being an engineer is that it's not, oh, I'm just giving it some prompt, it's going to one-shot it, everything works. It's around like figuring out what is the right context to give it, what's the right way to verify. After it's written code that it actually is correct.
Yeah, and to have it improve itself.
Exactly.
Like as you're working on it.
Yeah, it's all about getting like closing the loop, right? Giving it some way of verifying it. And if it's not correct, having the agent then be able to kind of like continue to make changes to get to whatever verification point you've given it.
Yeah, totally. And I guess pulling out of this, because the whole value of like the GitHub action bot that we made is we were able to distill it down to like a really nice prompt. And also for the partner, like the only reason it got so good is we gave it a style guide and that made it perform much better. And all of this kind of goes under the umbrella of skills, I would think, when people are talking about it. And I know that skills are actually like a really important part of this platform now. As of like very recently, it was like, that's the vocab word. That really clicks. It makes sense.
Yeah, we were debating this a lot internally of like how do we want to best program these Oz cloud agents? Like how is it going to be most accessible for developers to come in and like, okay, what are the different kinds of agents I want to program? How do I do this in an ergonomic way that fits into workflows that I'm already used to? And there's a lot of back and forth, and where we landed is like, there's this concept of agent skills that are slowly becoming not just like additional context you can give to an agent, but repeatable actions that an agent can take or be invoked with. So like an example is like you have an agent skill that knows how to remove feature flags in your code base, right? And that's something that's like a very repeatable action that you could imagine programming an Oz Cloud agent to do, either on like a trigger or, you know, reacting to a PR landing, et cetera. And we realized like, okay, like the skill is kind of like the base, I guess, like config for what a programmable Oz agent can be. And so in the API, in the CLI, you can specify you know, an agent skill either just from its like path. It can live in a public GitHub repo and we'll clone it for you if you're sandboxed. And just be like, all right, you know, Oz agent, like go do this skill with an additional user prompt, et cetera. And that's, again, trying to make this like really developer first. This is meeting people where they're at, already writing skills for all their agents. And now you can just automate them, put them into the cloud, run them as a part of scripts, et cetera.
And like the anatomy of a skill, I assume like a lot of people kind of know it, but it's really simple, right? Like it's just a folder with a markdown description of what it should do and how it should behave. Like, is there anything you would add to that?
So we are adding some additional stuff as a part of the platform to make it a little bit more programmable. So you can specify like a model you maybe want to run this particular skill with or some MCP configuration. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like what is additional context you want to give the agent about executing this task or something it might have access to do while accomplishing the task.
And you also mentioned like another one of the things that we built, which was the feature flag removal bot. I know there's another one that's like fraud detection bot. Yeah. And it's cool because there's this like agent management panel that we've called it where you can go in there and I can just see like all these workflows that everyone's running across the company where I'm like, oh, it's detecting fraud every 8 hours. There's that running. And it ran the feature flag remover on this schedule over here. And something I keep saying there is the word like schedule. That seems to be like a really important aspect of this is like, we help you with scheduled jobs as well as triggered jobs. So I guess I just want to ask, like, what is scheduling in the Oz platform and why do we make it so like convenient to use? Like, I don't have to set anything up. I just tell it, run this every 8 hours. It's like, sure, I'll do it.
So I think there are a few different types of workflows that we've noticed with agents, and with these very repeatable, don't need a human in the loop, it should run every so often, but nothing is really changing about the task that needs to happen. It's really great to not have to sit down and hit enter on a prompt for that to happen.
Yeah, totally.
And I think we had workflows like this. So there was the feature flag removal with fraud bot. That's a bot that runs every 8 hours, I think, at this point, and gives us a little report on, is there fraudulent usage of our platform? Which is very useful to know.
So that's like going through like usage inside of our analytics, or
I'm not sure how it might be like the Metabase
I would
API. But I don't know how to do it. But the person who set up the bot wrote a good prompt. And understands
with the skill
context.
To go find the data.
Exactly.
There it is.
It
Oz has that skill and
Metabase.
I don't.
It does.
Well, it uses it goes directly to kind of where we store data in BigQuery. But yeah, it was all about giving it the right context so it could go do its work.
Yeah. And then every morning, what you can do is go and have a PR dropped in your inbox if something needs to change in response to this data. It's not something that, like, the human just needs to review the ultimate thing, doesn't need to be involved in scheduling it, hitting enter, whatever. I think we knew that this was going to be a common type of workflow, so we wanted to make it very easy. If you have an environment and you have a prompt that you want to be running frequently, you can use the Warp CLI. You can just say warp schedule create or whatever the specific thing is, and it will manage it for you. I think that's... You never have to think about it again, except for when you're reviewing the PRs.
It was a huge aha moment for one of our like senior engineers when he was just like, you know, dog fooding, like playing around with the platform, going to give us feedback, et cetera. And he's like, I want to try setting up a schedule. And so he set up a schedule that was, I think, what ended up being FraudBot. And then like the next day he was like, a PR was in my inbox when I logged in and it was magical and it worked so well. And I didn't even have to, I forgot that I had done this yesterday and it's so great. I'm super bullish on scheduling. I think like kind of going back to this like agents as infrastructure, like, what are the tasks that engineers do every week or even every day that are repeatable? Sometimes, you know, like, I don't know, it's really helpful that the agent can just do like 80% of the work for you. And then you can just, you know, all right, this looks good. Or, oh, I need to investigate this more, et cetera.
And there are workflows like that where there's nothing particularly complicated happening in what you're actually doing, but there's a level of ambiguity in the input that couldn't be handled if you didn't have an agent in the loop.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are the things where scheduling is really helpful, because I am not using very much brain power to clean up a feature flag. It's the same thing every time. But without an agent, I can't really write code to do it for me on a schedule in a good way. And I think it's those workflows that really benefit from this scheduling framework that we've set up with the Oz platform.
Yeah, and that feature flag one's really valuable. I remember like going around the code base, I saw, there's like a feature flag in here for agent mode version 1. That's like, that's probably like 18 months old, but it's also has 100 instances, so I'm not going to delete that thing.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, what was it like designing that feature flag removal bot? And how does it work? Does it just like ask to remove the oldest feature flag every week? Or like, how did we sort of set that up?
So we actually have 2 iterations of feature flag work going. The first one predates scheduling. The first one is a GitHub action that runs using the built-in GitHub cron scheduling. And that goes through, it looks at the git blame for the feature flags file, and it says which ones are old after a certain date, and then proposes a fix. It'll do something nice where it'll try and match the user in the git blame to a user in our Warp organization and tag that person as reviewer on the PR, which is really helpful, because oftentimes at the beginning we were just tagging the platform team. I don't know for other people's feature flags if it's okay to remove it. So it's very helpful when they automatically get tagged and can give input on that.
Yeah.
We were realizing that was very helpful though, and with the built-in scheduling, we don't have to rely on GitHub's cron infrastructure to do that. We can just pop into Warp. I can write a prompt that's basically what I just said to you. Use git blame to figure out who wrote a thing. Make sure you tag the person who reviewed it. This is how you clean up a feature flag. Run this once a week with the cron syntax.
Yeah.
And that's sort of it, which is very easy to schedule. And then hopefully we log in and get a PR in our inbox that looks good.
Nice. Yeah, that's crazy easy. And there was another thing you mentioned a little bit in that explanation about like it runs inside of an environment and it clones it down and it gets everything done. And I feel like this is the first time I've seen one of these cloud agent hosts where we actually talk about the environment. Like I've seen these tools exist where it's like, and it runs in the cloud. What's in the cloud environment? What does that have access to? I don't know. We'll figure it out. And then that leads to like, well, it doesn't have access to like all the repositories I want it to know about. Maybe it doesn't have the right CLI commands so that it can go do like context gathering itself. But we like made environments like a noun, like a thing that's in the product. So I guess I would just ask like, why did we do that? Why did we design it in this way where environments are this configurable thing that you can tie to a cloud agent run?
Yeah, I can start on this, and then I want Lily's take too, because she built a lot of our environment infrastructure. But when we were thinking about this was, I think, one of the most difficult both like product and technical challenges of this whole project is like, what is a cloud environment? What do we want to put on the user? What do we want to handle ourselves? And it's a really hard balance to strike of like, how much do we want to optimize for that like one-click magical setup of like, oh my God, something's running in the cloud, versus like, I want this to be able to work on a variety of code bases. I want this to be able to be very flexible so that enterprises can use it. There's a lot of different like product trade-offs here. And I guess like what is an environment? An environment is a set of GitHub repos. It is a Docker image that would theoretically support whatever code is being cloned into the environment. And then it's a series of setup commands that would be required to compile or run any code in that environment. So it sounds pretty simple, but like not the easiest thing to set up. We've tried to streamline the process by we have a fully like agentic way of setting up this environment where you can just like one click be like, create environment, this repo, and it will do the analysis for you, build a Docker image, and then give you the command to run so that you can, get your environment and start running your agents, which has helped a lot. But it's still definitely, I think, like, a pretty complicated step, or like there's a little bit of like onus on the user to like figure out exactly how they want to configure this. But I know, Lili, you did a lot of the work, especially in like the Docker image side. Like, what were the product challenges you feel like you ran into? Like, what was interesting about it?
Yeah, I think environments, it's interesting. So I was doing some Googling around before this. you're right. It's not something that people talk about a lot when they talk about these cloud agents, but technically it's very interesting. And for us, I think it was both product-wise and technically very interesting. I think the first thing that we had to think about was, how much control do we want to give to the user over the Docker image that this agent runs in?
Yeah.
And the big trade-off there is, if we provide the Docker images and you can select from a set of Docker images, I can make sure that everything we need is installed on the Docker image. I can make sure it has the Warp CLI, which is what we use to run our agents.
Sure.
I can make sure it has Git and the GitHub CLI. I can make sure if there are any other tools we want to use to run Oz remotely, it has it. The problem is, though, that if I want to do that, I also have to make sure that I give enough pre-packaged images with different language tool sets. So I'd have like a Warp Go image and a Warp Rust image and a Warp Node image.
Yeah.
And then we have to maintain all of those. And then it's on us to make sure the versions are compatible with everyone's code bases. And although it makes the setup for the user a lot easier, and for us, it means that we can ensure that we have all the pieces we need when we run Oz, it's not going to do, because we don't want to it's limiting for us and for users to have to only maintain a set of distinct repositories. So we went the other route where we said, okay, we want to allow users to specify basically any Docker image they want, and we will find a way to run the Warp CLI on that Docker image with Git and GitHub so that their code base can run, it can compile fully, they can run whatever tests they normally want to run. It was great for our code base. We have like a specific Docker image that we would use to test the client side and server side together, which uses Go and Rust and some other more complicated packages that we need installed to get it to run. So this is a great test environment. But yes, so we had this core challenge of, we want to allow a user to supply any arbitrary Docker image, but we need to have the Warp CLI binary, we need to have the Git binary, and we need to have the GitHub CLI binary, because things will not run if we don't have it.
Yeah.
The way we ended up doing it is we mount what's called a sidecar volume. So we have a separate Docker file. This is the one that we do control. And this Docker file contains Warp CLI binary. It contains a GitHub CLI binary. And it contains instructions for how to install the Git binary on the main Docker image, which I can talk about later why that's a separate thing maybe. But it is. And then what happens is, when you supply your Docker image to us, we build this Docker image, we mount the file system from our Docker image into your main Docker image at /agent, and we add the binaries there to the path in the main Docker image so that when it wants to use the Warp CLI, it can grab it from our sidecar volume. When it wants to use the GitHub CLI, it can grab it from our sidecar volume. And then we have a script that says, basically, this is how you run all of this. There are a lot of other technical things that came up with that I was joking to Ian before we did this podcast, like I probably could wax poetic about a lot of these things, but I'll stop there for now. That was like the core trade-offs.
And taking a step back about kind of environments as a primitive at all, like to your point earlier, Ben, I think what's like so important about having like an explicit environment primitive is you're going to want different configuration of different sets of repos, different network access limitations based on which repos you want an agent to run on. And so like as a user using Oz, it really matters to have that level of like fine-grained control. Like for a public, like we have a Warp GitHub repository that's really just public issues only. For that, like it matters a little bit less, like the level of like network access we give versus a environment that has our actual source code on it, right? We don't want to be subject to like prompt injection where someone posts our Warp source code somewhere or anything like that. And that's obviously like security is something we care deeply about for ourselves and for our users. And so like giving these level of controls really matters to like build a platform that you can really like build on and have a lot of success on.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, as we talked earlier about having agents that are able to self-validate, I think it's also very important to be able to ensure that your environment has the tools an agent would need in it to self-validate. It's not enough to just have a copy of the code and be able to compile that copy of the code. If you want your agent to be doing more complicated things, maybe you've come up with a clever way to test it. You want to make sure that, I don't know, if I need a certain package to test it, either I have that in the Docker image that I've supplied, or I have the right network access restrictions to make sure that we can actually go fetch the package and install it and things like that. I think as we try and offload more and more of the actual development work, not just writing code or reading code, push it remotely, I think that environment setup piece becomes even more important, and the configurability there becomes even more important.
Yeah. And a little bit earlier, you were saying like, yeah, adding this extra environment step makes it a little bit harder to set up. But I think you're underselling how easy it is. Like when I was trying to do this for my own repo, I just said /create environment and said, you probably want a JavaScript environment, right? It's like, yeah, sure. And the setup command is pm install and pm build, right? Yep, that's exactly it. All right, you're done. Now you can run Cloud Agents up there. So there's not really that much friction added, but the ability now is, first off, I could tell the agent to update that environment if I want to. Like, I know people are doing all sorts of crazy stuff with ClaudBot or OpenClaw or whatever it's called now to like just set up this machine and have it do a bunch of agentic tasks for me and have it access all sorts of tools. And I could dip into that if I want to. Like if I wanted to add the CLI to access my Google Drive, which exists now apparently, I could probably tell it update the environment to make sure all that stuff is in here with the credentials and all that. And then you would now have that added to your environment. So I guess like, yeah, there's a little bit of friction where it shows you what it's doing, but now it's programmable. Like you can do whatever you want inside of this sandbox pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier with prompt engineering, Ian and I did battle with the create environment prompt to make sure that it's easy.
It took a lot of iteration to get it.
It worked out.
We had a big sheet of different open source repos and different tech stacks they could be with. And I remember Ian and I were just trying different things.
Yeah, it was a lot of back and forth. I'm really happy with where it landed. It was not the most like streamlined process to get there, but it's
I think
fun.
Product-wise too, it was the first time I had worked on a product where an agent was part of the thing we were trying to launch. And that was an interesting mentality shift because when I'm testing normal code, I can, pretty thoroughly manually test it myself and feel confident that the thing that people use is the thing that I'm testing. Mm-hmm. But when we were working on this create environment flow, there was definitely an added level of anxiety of, I'm testing it a lot now, but I don't know what it's going to say when Ben tries to create the environment. But I think we've wrangled it into a good spot.
Well, kind of, going back to what we were talking about with the iterating on the GitHub action for reviewing. One thing that I did there is that I had the agent review the prompt and I was just like, make this prompt more deterministic. Like I was like, there are 3 explicit steps here. You must not like go away from these steps. And that was like part of the prompt iteration process was like making the prompt itself behave more like normal code would almost, where there's like very deterministic steps that are going to be taking place.
And so I think one thing that I'm sure you'll agree with is that most people who are going to build on Oz are going to actually like build on Oz via a prompt, most likely in Warp. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how you made sure Warp was set up to have the right context about how to build on Oz?
Yeah, so we this is kind of going back to like skills, which we had touched on earlier. We have these built-in skills that Warp itself knows how to use Oz, the platform. And so kind of going back to the skill primitive, which is really, really powerful for making agents more powerful, the agent built into the Warp terminal will know how to interact with deploy agents via the Oz platform. And so it's a straightforward way for people to experiment with the platform, set up environments, etc. And yeah, that was a big part of this launch is like, how do we make sure this is straightforward for current Warp users to start experimenting with the platform itself?
Yeah, and that note about documentation definitely speaks to me because I worked on Astro for a number of years, which was just API design. That's literally it. And even in the earliest forms of Copilot autocompletion, I realized once I finally got the API right, the tab completions just kind of completed the sentences. And if I had my nouns wrong, it was just trying to autocomplete code that looks like something else I've used before, but not quite. So it kind of like forces you to do things that are intuitive because otherwise it's just not going to hold the tool right, which is just part of good design. And I also remember like the meetings we had about like, is skill a noun? Is agent the noun that does the skill? Like it wasn't even the first week and then we built it. It was just like constant iteration of, we need to refine that even more. And it doesn't make sense.
But what's interesting about where we landed is that I feel like when the design of the API is quite clean, just from like a documentation perspective, the code ends up being quite clean too. Like
true. Yeah.
Like I think in some previous iterations we had gone down, especially with like, do we want like do we want to just use skills or this different kind of idea of an agent? Like it wasn't passing the sniff test in the code in a lot of ways. And so that's where we had to like kind of go back to the drawing board of like, is the API design right? Like, is this going to be intuitive? Like if it's starting to get confusing in the code, then like, maybe it's also going to be really confusing in the documentation, which means users are going to be really confused. And so I found that really interesting with building this out. Like, when you have this designed well, the code kind of, becomes a lot more straightforward. And I think, well designed.
Yeah. And I've noticed that with agentic development in general, like models usually don't tell you when something is wrong. They will just get to the right answer. And if you find it gave like a very over-engineered answer, it's not because the model was dumb that day. It's because it was working around this one little like sort of issue with how you design your architecture that you don't even know about. But if you just ask the agent, like, did you design around something there? It'll say, oh yeah, there was actually this one part that didn't really make much sense to me. And you realize, oh, well, we should talk about that.
Yeah, that's actually one thing. A couple weeks ago at the company, we had like a required engineering learning session of like how to better interact with agents. And one of the takeaways from that session that I've really started doing and has been helping is like always include in your prompts, like what is confusing to you about this? Like, is there anything you need clarification on?
Don't make any assumptions on my behalf.
Yeah,
no, that's a good one.
Because you'll be really surprised. Like sometimes like a plan will like kind of look good at first glance and then like the code won't start.
The code will unfold weirdly.
The code will unfold weird. And then if you go back and being like what assumptions did you make? Or like, what did you, I don't know, what parts of this do you think aren't working well? It'll be like, oh yeah, I didn't like XYZ thing doesn't fit one. I'm like, well, yeah, I should just include that in my initial prompt. So that's actually helped a lot in like the planning process, is just including those little tidbits.
Completely agree.
Yeah. And all of that is just what I do as an engineer anyways. Like I am the type where it's like, I could come up with a plan, but I got to feel it out in code before I know if this plan's actually going to unfold the way I want it to. So it's usually like, it's not just plan, do thing. It's usually like plan, then do the thing, review the code, and then maybe write a second plan or a third one, or completely change how you're doing it. And you mentioned there was like a whole initiative of just having us use our agents better in order to build on Warp. Like, what were some of the concrete things that have come out of that so far beyond just prompting tips?
Yeah, that's a great call out. So a lot of things.
Yeah.
So one actually is building more things on top of Oz.
Sure.
Like there's a lot more kind of Oz as infra, to use our discussion earlier.
Sure.
That we can leverage to make our lives easier at Warp. And so that's something we're kind of still pushing on. I was release cop this week, and it's an annoying headache in all these small ways of like getting a release out, and we're trying to build like a bunch of things to improve that. Making it clear kind of when we should update our agents MD file and like what makes sense in our agents MD file, what makes sense as a skill. It's something we're working on, right? Making sure the agent has the right context and when it has that context. Progressive disclosure is like the new hot phrase, which is like only give the agent the understanding when it really needs it instead of kind of telling it up front. And that's kind of the thing we're trying to balance when thinking through this. And what's cool about that is like whatever we end up kind of settling on is also something that'll make sense for our users. It's not just purely a kind of Warp internal thing. The other thing is actually just trying to better measure kind of like developer productivity in AI usage internally. The reason we're trying to do that is it gives us a better understanding of like, are we using AI effectively and how we are actually increasing kind of like our overall engineering horsepower or velocity.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that we can also kind of like better intuit and become experts on in terms of developer productivity, to then like talk to customers and talk to like market Warp, because we're actually like experts in that area as opposed to Googling about dev prod metrics, but not actually having a good understanding of like what we should be tracking, especially in kind of the AI developer world.
Yeah, because I heard the metric internally is like 60% of PRs are helped by an agent in some way.
Exactly.
Honestly, that sounds low compared to what I've been doing recently. It's probably skewed against like in the past. Like it's just been ramping up a lot.
Well, a little bit is also, are we measuring it accurately?
Yeah.
I think that's actually a
like
big
that's the
part
60% we know.
Yeah, exactly.
I start every PR with an agent now.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have a company like mandate with that, but it's like, I think /plan within Warp is so powerful that like,
yes.
And it is such a good way of like a lot of times I'll be like about to go into a meeting and I don't quite have enough time to like fully work through a problem, but I have like 15 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to craft a good prompt here. I'm going to put on like a thinking model that I know will take a while. I'm going to / plan, and then I'll, go into this, interview or meeting, and then I'll come back and then I will have a plan to review. And it's allowed, I think, a lot of engineers at Warp to continue being very productive, like IC engineers, while still doing a lot of like managerial work, product work, stuff that like historically has really interrupted engineering flow.
Could not agree more. I'm in an annoying number of meetings day to day, more than I'd like. I always have at least 2 or 3 agents working on something. And so my free time, if it's like 20 minutes between a meeting, it's spent on unblocking agents, writing good plans, verifying. Other than that, I just make sure kind of all the agents are set up for success, whether they're kind of local or running on the cloud. And then they're just cooking while I'm in meetings. It's great.
Just a little fun anecdote too.
Yeah.
So we have this, not mandate, but at our team meetings every week, we launch an agent, or someone should launch an agent to do something. I think sometimes now that can be a little bit of a meme in a positive way. So we have a run club in the SF office. And before run club this week, we said, hold on, everyone, we have to launch an agent.
Before run club, you have to run.
No,
an agent.
Yeah. And the agent was
Agent's
running while we
with
were
you.
running.
Yeah.
But we came back and I had some changes to review, and it was kind of wonderful.
That's so cool. And you were saying like you're running 2 or 3 at a time. I'll admit I still have the old school. I'm just going to clone my code base 5 times and just have warp internal -2, -3, -4 and stream like burners on a stove. Like I'm going to put that there and that over there and review them all. But I know people are doing crazy things like putting things in the cloud and putting in a remote workflow, using work trees, among other things. Like what strategies do y'all have for like running multiple things at once?
I think the cloud call out is really good because when I got my beefy, beautiful MacBook for work, I thought there's no way I'm going to run out of storage on this thing.
No.
It's huge.
Cargo finds a way.
And with 5 checkouts of our Rust code base and a lot of build caches, that happens really frequently.
Yeah.
So I think we're running into limitations when you're trying to multi-thread on a single device of, obviously I need separate copies of the code base if my agents are working on completely different problems, but it's kind of challenging to have all of those going on a single device at once. So I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but what I do is sometimes I'll have an agent do research for me on something in the cloud. You can open in the Warp terminal a new tab in cloud mode, which is very cool, and that will run a cloud agent for whatever prompt you put in. So I'll sometimes have it write a plan for me if it needs to do research in the cloud. Sometimes I'll write a plan interactively locally and then kick off a cloud agent and give it access to that plan and say, just execute this plan. Something I think is really cool too with cloud agents is asking it to do experimental things. Like, can you run some tests and see how long this thing takes? Can you actually measure the performance of a thing? And that would be very disruptive to do on my own computer, but putting it on the cloud really helps there. So I think trying to identify, what tasks are best run when I'm not around and where can I kick them away from me has been very helpful in dealing with not an overwhelming amount of multi-threading going on my actual device.
I just had a cloud agent do I was building out a cache that I wanted to do some testing on, and I was just like, I wonder if a cloud agent could do this. And so I'd had it, and it was like an interaction between our client repo and our server repo. And I was like, can you do a test to see what's the latency with cache misses and with hits? And it did it. And I was like, this is awesome, because that would be so annoying to test and put into a test plan of a PR description. And I just sent it off in the background, and it did a really comprehensive test for it.
That's awesome.
No, sorry, Aloke.
No, you're fine. I mean, I think the crux of it is there's no reason to be limited by compute of your own machine.
Yeah.
Right? To Lili's point, some amount of, you may do some kind of upfront working on a plan with an agent, but once you have that plan, basically all the work can be done on the cloud. And for a lot of things, everything can be done on the cloud. But again, it's a little bit of a mindset shift of working not and thinking about, I just need to pick up a task and do it on my machine. And it's more about getting it onto the cloud as fast as possible and moving on to another task. Which again is very, very different from how engineers are used to working. Yeah. Another thing related to that is code is cheap now. It's really, really cheap because you can kind of get a bunch of agents writing a bunch of different approaches in parallel. And so it's related to like the creativity discussion we had earlier. You can now kind of experiment and try a bunch of different solutions and see which one makes sense.
Yeah.
For that to really work, you have to kind of do that on the cloud. You can't have, doesn't really make sense for have 5 local agents all working through different solutions. Like you could theoretically do that, but again, you're limited by compute. If you actually want to get something done, then you probably can't have a 6th one on another task. And so then it's really easy to think about this instead as, all right, here are the 3 different solutions. I'm not positive which one makes sense, but I want to investigate all of them. I'm going to get all of them running on the cloud and then move on to something else.
I think another benefit of the cloud is the things that you would be okay with an agent doing on your behalf on the code base, or like a big application we're exploring is like computer use in these cloud agents of like some engineers might not be comfortable with an agent, testing UI by spinning up a browser and clicking around like on your own computer. It grabs your mouse. Like that interrupts your workflow. It's annoying. But if you do that in a sandbox environment in the cloud and it can come back with like 4 different screenshots of what the UI looks like in the test plan of the PR, like that's awesome and great. So I think really powerful use case.
Not even just a comfort thing, but I can't do anything on my computer if the agent is opening a browser and testing.
And you certainly can't try like 5 different iterations.
Yeah, exactly. Idea. So you need to use cloud agents in that context.
Can't afford 5 Mac Minis. I don't have enough space. Yeah, but that makes a ton of sense. So like, because people have been wondering, like, can we set up like a really great work tree solution, and should I be cloning a repository multiple times? Like, there's definitely a place for all of these things. People are going really deep on those kinds of workflows. But at least in my own experience, like just doing even small things that require a dev server. Like, I don't want 5 agents all testing and stomping over port numbers. And I certainly don't want a bunch of Rust builds running at the same time because my GPU can barely handle 1, let alone 4.
Yeah, I think thinking about, does it make sense to have independent clones versus work trees? How many should I be running in parallel? Is like a H2 2025 problem. It's not a 2026 problem, because 2026 is about running in the cloud, right? It's about getting as many agents as possible running through something like Oz on the cloud and reporting some set of artifacts to like show you how it verified its work, giving you screenshots to talk about computer use, giving you PR and talking about how it verified its code. My take to your initial question about like what's the right workflow, work trees or multiple clones, is like it doesn't really matter. Like, pick one, but at the end of the day, the like thing you should be emphasizing as you're developing is get whatever you're working on off onto the cloud and off your machine, and then like focus on planning for something if you need to be in the flow on your machine, but really not much else.
That's cool. Yeah, and I mean, not to undersell like this computer use and artifacts thing. I know it's pretty early, but I've seen some demos of it, just like clicking around an application. It grabbed the mouse. It said, all right, I have the Figma mocks pulled up here and I have the app pulled up here. And we build a native app. So it's not like, oh, why don't you just make a browser extension in order to control it that way? Well, there's a number of applications you could build that are not in the browser, like a terminal built in Rust. The only way at that point is to have some sort of sandbox that can actually do this stuff. So watching it point and click, like, yeah, it's a bit slow, but that's not the point. You're going to come back and review the code when it's done. And you were mentioning like artifacts are a part of this. So it's not invisible what it's doing. Like you can actually see, like we're talking about screenshots. I could imagine a screen recording is possible. It's something that it could do as well. So how are we thinking about like all of making it clear what the agent did to get to its solution? Because right now it's kind of like it goes off in a black box and comes back with a well-written PR, but there's so much more that you may want to see. Like the conversation link, which is something that we support. You can actually click in and see the conversation. There's screenshots. There's like, what else is there?
I can sort of speak to this. I think figuring out what the important checkpoints are in an agent conversation is definitely something we're still working through. So it's very clear at the end of a conversation, you know, if you've produced a PR or multiple PRs, if you've created a Git branch, if you've created a plan, if you've created screenshots, we want to see. And we do support now, we have a special way of saving these as, we're calling them artifacts, that can get surfaced back to the user. A lot of this is about what tools you give your agent and how you tell it to report its output and what is useful. I think that's something that we will keep exploring. If there are other, you know, let's say maybe I want my agent to write me a report. What sort of format do I want that report in? What's the best way to look at it? are things right now that you kind of have to use your creativity for. But I think in the coming months, as we keep extending the Oz platform, will be something that we support more and more natively. You mentioned we have these like session transcripts. I think this is one really awesome thing about Warp's.
Well, it's not even a transcript.
You can
it's
see
like,
the live session.
I can just go in the session. I can even like, because I've started doing this, like if I go in a session of what the agent did, I can just ask it, why did you decide to do this? It's like, yeah, here's why I decided to do that. Like asking an engineer, why'd you make this choice in the PR? And they answer right away.
Yeah, and that's really cool because as a company, Warp invested a lot in collaboration features in 2023, 2024.
Yeah, it happened to be super useful.
Well, back then it was like maybe you want multiple engineers to be able to collaborate in the terminal on a problem. I think it was sometimes harder to find engineers collaborating together in the context of a terminal session.
Sure.
But now we're all collaborating with agents.
Yep.
And we have this native collaboration infrastructure that is really technically well thought out and fundamentally solid. And for this Oz platform launch, we did have to do a little bit of work, but mostly on top of that, we just had to figure out what does it look like to collaborate with an agent using all of this existing infrastructure, which is really
still
awesome.
makes sense even if the collaborator is the agent.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
So I think that's another really cool way that we can audit and monitor and sort of trace through these conversations even as they're happening on remote machines.
You asked a question around like, how do you think about kind of reasoning through what an agent did through kind of like conversation link, which is effectively almost like a reasoning trace, a PR, screenshot, so forth. Kind of like the way I think about that is that when a human writes a PR, it's not just the code and that's it, right? Like an engineer is going to include a bunch of context about here's the change I made, here's why it's correct. They're going to include a loom or screenshots or a video to show it's correct.
Yeah.
The same thing's true for an agent. And it's all about like, how do you automate that? So you just get some PR or some artifact that gives you like full confidence that the change is correct. Right. So if you can have the code and if you can have the PR and some screenshots that show that it worked correctly, and you can see kind of it explaining important design decisions, whether it's in comments or through a conversation link that walks through that, then you're like, have all the things you need to have as much confidence as possible that the change is right, which is the same thing that's true whenever you review code from a human as well. So it's like very analogous, I think, to the same kind of like diligence you do when reviewing code from some other engineer.
Except you now have the ability of I can go question this person.
Exactly.
At any
you
hour
just
of the
go
day.
ask
them.
Because if I'm reading someone's PR, I don't want to waste their time by saying, why did you do it this way for every little thing? But when we have this full conversation, we can see their thoughts in a way that humans do not document their thoughts.
Yep.
That's wild.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can interact with them. Like I've always had this on PR reviews where it's like, I could mention them on this review, but I should probably also Slack them so that they see it a little faster. And it's all a convenience thing, but agents don't care. You can talk to them at any hour. Okay, so kind of rounding this out, and this is to all of y'all, like we've talked about a lot of forward-looking things, including like orchestration with sub-agents and going deep on computer use and artifacts. Like, what are y'all most excited to build onto the Oz platform now that this thing is launched and out in the world? Like, what's the next thing that gets you excited?
I think the 2026 is definitely a year of orchestration. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone has a different definition of what orchestration means.
Yes.
I'm really excited to for Warp to build a native orchestration product on top of Oz, right? So it's like the pain point is you have something that's like pretty nebulous. It can be broken down to a bunch of different sub tasks, and you want a bunch of agents working on them in parallel, and you want some agent to verify it, and then ultimately you just want a PR or a set of PRs that work. And that's the big thing that everyone's working on right now. Oz is an incredible foundation to build on top of that, but there's way more we can do to make that really seamless. And I'm really, really excited to see us push on that.
Yeah, I think building on that, something that would integrate with our planning mode with Oz, you have you do a slash plan for a complicated feature you're building, and as a part of that, it's all right, I recommend you deploy these 5-6 Oz agents in this in this order. I can monitor progress, etc. Kind of building off this idea of an orchestrator. I think Warp is really well set up with the primitives we have right now, and the things we've already built on the Oz platform. But the potential for the next level, I think, is what really excites me.
Yeah, I think I agree both with Aloke and Ian about sort of taking this a level up. I think seeing how the agent can be able to both, sort of as Aloke was mentioning earlier, prove that its change is correct. I think that's something that we don't fully have yet, but supporting that more natively. And then also how it can prove not just to humans, but to other agents in an orchestration context. Like, I'm done with how do we, transfer information? How do we dispatch subagents effectively and have them report back their findings? I think it'll be exciting to see what sort of workflows that unlocks.
Yeah, crazy. Well, this was a great discussion. Everyone should go try out Oz. You can find it oz.warp.dev. We got platform, we got CLI, SDKs, environments to put in as many repos as you want, have it run around. Scheduling, of course, there's so much cool stuff. So thanks for taking the time to chat through this.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.